Hi and welcome. You are listening to The Philosophists, a pair of software guys attempting to leave that all behind and inject a little philosophy into your everyday. Actually, today I am more of a philosoloist, as I still haven't managed to track Simon down after the last episode. You'll have to make do with me, Daniel McCrea. However, I am very excited to be joined by our guest, Daniel McCrea, who is an instrumental figure in advancing philosophy for children in Ireland. Daniel is the creator of PhilosophyShortCourse.com, a free resources website for Irish philosophy teachers, and the event Gadfly. He holds a BA and MA in philosophy and regularly teaches philosophy at Gonzaga College SJ secondary school in South Dublin. He is trained in teaching philosophy with Marilla Rice, Peter Worley, and Educate Together, and facilitates public philosophy events for the Philosopher's Hat and Socrates Cafe. His mission is to make teaching philosophy the best job in Ireland. Today, Daniel will be talking about Gadfly, which is an online event he has created for Irish philosophy educators and boasts a formidable lineup. Prior to that, we will discuss a lot more, including philosophy and film, getting philosophy into the education cycle in Ireland and bringing it to a younger audience, why children should care about philosophy and how it helps them develop, why teachers should care about philosophy and how it can change their engagement with students, and why you should care about philosophy. We also talk a lot about different philosophers and their ideas and what kids and non-kids can learn from them. I really enjoyed today's conversation, so much so that I spent about half of it engaging in manic chuckles and laughter, so I hope you don't find that too distracting. The format of the show is also different. It clocks in at about an hour and a half, and you may have noticed the letters LP at the start of the episode title. Just so you know, that stands for long play, so if you look out for that in future, you'll know what you're getting in for in advance. Today's show is pretty much unedited, so you will find that there's a different feel and pace to it. We'd love to hear what you think of the different format, especially for longer conversations. One last thing before we start. Without Simon, there was no one to correct my wild mispronunciations, so everything from German words to Dan's upcoming event, Gadfly, fell foul of this. But despite these misfires, I think you'll really enjoy today's conversation, and I'll drop you into it right now after the all-important sound check. Okay, let's get philosophistical with Daniel McCrea.
How did that sound?
That sounds fantastic. That's the sound check done. It sounded brilliant.
All right, good, so, man.
Due diligence is done even. So
that's great. No, look, like I said, I did I think I was saying to you, I did a 20-minute presentation to the air because Teams never told me the connection was broken. So yeah, always worth checking.
Yeah, just to be sure. And as well, for tonight, if I'm recording the recording rolling along yet, and we've got a video here, we'll probably release this as audio. But I do end up having I managed to drop some sort of chair from the attic as I brought it down. So I have this kind of, it looks like a kind of a fly trying to steal an election just floating around here. So I don't think we'll be talking about that fly tonight. We'll probably be talking about
we'll stick to the Gadfly.
You would stick to the Gadfly. So that's probably a suitable point to start with. Do you want to tell us about the philosophy short course?
Yeah. So I suppose I studied philosophy at university. I did my BA in literature and philosophy, then I got my master's, and then I started doing a PhD. Took me about a year and a half to realize that was a really terrible idea, and that was at Warwick. No disrespect to Warwick, of course. So I had this background in philosophy. I then moved into educational technology for the last 12 years. And I was always looking for a way to kind of combine my interest in ed tech and my passion for philosophy. About 2 years ago, I launched PhilosophyShortCourse.com, which is it's effectively a resources website for people who are interested in teaching philosophy. So it has everything from what you might call student stimulus material to templates for helping with planning to advice about how to convince your principal to let you run a philosophy course. So it's really tries to be kind of holistic. And then about a year ago, I overcame that devil fear, Declan. I've been wanting to do a kind of a live event for a long time, and I kind of sat myself down and realized the only reason I hadn't done it yet is because I was afraid I was going to look stupid and nobody would come and nobody would speak and that it would be a failure. And, I just decided that was no good reason to stop me from doing something. So I plowed on. We had our first conference in March. We had 100 signups, had amazing speakers. We have our second conference coming up on August 17th. So this interview is timely. And it's really just an opportunity to bring some of the amazing talent that we have in Ireland and also some voices from the UK to an Irish audience and just to share ideas and inspire and get the conversation going. So I'm really happy with it.
Oh, cool. So that was Gladfly 1. And,
yes.
Now we're moving on to Gladfly 2.
Yeah, and Gadfly 3 is actually coming up in Easter, and I've already booked some really fat people for that. So, the machine rolls on.
Oh, fantastic. So I suppose a lot of people listening, they have the various levels of familiarity with philosophy. So I think if we work in from the name of the event, Gladfly, what is that all about?
Sure. So the Gadfly is a metaphor from the Apology. Basically, it's a metaphor for what philosophy is and how Socrates saw himself. So Socrates was one of these characters who was probably a bit of a pain to deal with. He looked around him in the society that he lived in and realized that a lot of the people who enjoyed power and privilege and influence maybe didn't know what they were talking about so much, and really didn't examine their own ideas, didn't have solid reasons for holding their positions. And so he developed this thing called the Socratic method, which is, I suppose it's an antidote to being a jerk. So rather than just confrontationally putting his finger in people's chests, he came up with this idea that maybe we should have a little bit of empathy and we should question other people about why they hold the positions they do, rather than forcing our own ideas upon them. So the Gadfly metaphor is a horsefly that bites horses, and he saw himself as kind of an agitator of sorts. So I think philosophers are often quite mischievous people, so it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, and his whole way of approaching philosophy, I suppose, so for some people, philosophy was almost invented with Socrates. There's the pre-Socratics, which is everyone before him, and then everything after him. And I suppose people talk about the Socratic method. Is that something, I suppose, that's central in teaching philosophy to a younger audience, which is our core interest, I suppose, as we discuss this?
Let me see. The Socratic method, I think, is a very good dialogic technique, and it's a very good way to frame discussions and debates. And the aspirations that it has are really asking people to question the reasons that they have for holding certain positions. It's a methodological approach to conversation and to inquiry. It is useful in classrooms, and it's something that, as maybe a fan of the history of philosophy, I feel people should know about, but it's not central. I mean, you can certainly do philosophy without using the Socratic method, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could be overplayed to say that it was central to
yeah. And look, I mean, we all know what happened to him. He was forced to drink hemlock by the state because he just antagonized too many people. And anybody who's had to deal with the philosopher at a dinner party really could probably empathize maybe more with the leaders of the state than with Socrates himself. We can be a bit annoying. hopefully in a good way.
I think there was just one word you mentioned there, was a dialogic. Just do you want to explain that, what that is? And
sure. So maybe we could contrast it with a more didactic approach. So a dialogic approach is it's a pedagogical approach, or an approach based in teaching methodology, where you engage in, you start off from a position of empathy with the person that you're arguing with or against. And it is a method of dialoguing with somebody who may hold positions that are opposite to you, in a way that's mutually respectful, that allows you to form what we call a community of inquiry. So rather than being the top-down know-it-all who transfers his great knowledge to the other person he's talking with, it's really a discursive technique to co-discover some truth. And what I like about it is that at its core, it has this idea of intellectual humility. So you're familiar with the phrase, wisest is he who knows he knows nothing at all. The dialogic method really has humility at its core. Let's have a conversation about this. Tell me where you're coming from. Maybe I'm going to learn something I didn't know. And so that's a very appealing approach. I think it's non-confrontational, even though it did result in the first instance in death.
Which is interesting when you move from non-confrontational confrontation.
Yeah. Well, look, if you annoy the wrong people,
something's never changed.
Yeah.
I think it's just as a side diversion. I think it's a really interesting method because definitely at work, I think it's basically it's phrasing your point that you want to get across, your agenda, but you're getting there via questions. And you're basically asking the other person at each point to justify their position. And you're almost branching, as each time they answer yes, no, you're kind of branching the difference and bringing them down that path until either they end up in contradiction or they actually end up with the right answer. And, you have to go, okay, there you go.
Yeah, but one of the things I love about it also is that there's no guarantee, I suppose, that the other person will end up adopting your presumed correct position. There's every opportunity for you to discover something during the dialogue that you didn't know. And we all get things wrong, of course. So I like the humility of it, where you start from a place where you genuinely want to have a dialogue with someone, a two-way exchange of ideas. And you may end up holding the same position that you started off with, or having better reasons for it, or changing your position and having better reasons for that. So I like the integrity of the approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's much easier to back down from asking a question than it is to back down from making a very firm statement.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you should mention the workplace as well, because these techniques are like extremely valuable and useful in the workplace in terms of collaborative problem solving, and we might talk a little bit about that later.
Yeah, and certainly in relation to the teaching of philosophy to children, I think. I want to touch on you're obviously got a keen interest in film and philosophy.
Yeah.
And those two things overlap a lot. Did you spend much time kind of exploring that prior to maybe your latest projects?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a former life, and it really feels like a former life, I worked for a film production company called Vico Films, who, among a lot of other projects, did The Young Offenders, would be their most kind of famous work. Great bunch of guys. So I was always interested in film. And then for my undergrad thesis, I explored ideas around philosophy and film, specifically as a film as a way of doing philosophy. So what do I mean by that? I focused on kind of key concerns for 20th century philosophers and really philosophers since the beginning of time. But let's say someone like Heidegger. So Heidegger prioritizes our relationship to death. And he says, look, you are a being towards death, and you have to apprehend that fact. You have to let it inform your decisions. It is part of the being of people that we are beings that will die. We have a terminus. And how does that relate to film? Film deals with death in really interesting ways. So one way in which film can be maybe inauthentic or disingenuous is that often we are presented with the concept of death through a villain or a killer or a murderer, or maybe a supernatural force. And in those films, the hero always conquers death, always triumphs over it. And one of the ideas I was exploring in the thesis was that this fosters an inauthentic apprehension of our own being towards death. We have this vicarious experience of confronting death, and then ultimately we're relieved of that burden because the hero conquers the villain, and we can go back to neglecting our duty of care to our own finitude. God, I feel like I just read you my entire thesis there. It was an undergrad thesis. It was short.
That's a great synopsis. If you had to defend your thesis, I think you've just gotten your qualifications. So fantastic. It's really interesting. I'm dying to just go down that route and jump on that and talk more about it. But I think when we chatted before, I think we both admitted to each other we could end up talking for about 20 hours about philosophy.
That is absolutely true. So, yeah.
I'll pull back from the break, but what might be nice is just, I suppose, we touched on Heidegger. Maybe a lot of people won't be familiar with Heidegger listening. Heidegger, I suppose he was one of the first philosophers that focused on being. I think it was, I can't get the pronunciation, Dasein or Dasein. Dasein. I'm sure any German listeners will correct us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it literally is the act of being, right? I mean, I'm not super familiar, but that is it. And it led to other branches of maybe philosophy afterwards, Kierkegaard and existentialism.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my ordering on Kierkegaard right, actually. I'm not sure who was first there, but certainly existentialism and the focusing on being and what it is to be something, to be an actual thing in the world, which is an unusual thing if you've never heard this from philosophy.
Look, you're really getting into the deeper end of things. And I mean, Heidegger himself knew that, he said it's the great forgotten question of philosophy, the question of being. How I like to think about it is we have a conception of the ontology or the being of things around us, things like tables and chairs, but we don't reflect very much on the nature of being itself and the nature of what it means to be a human being. So this led him in the second half of Being in Time to perform this kind of existential analytic. So what is it to be a human, and how is that distinct from the being of other entities around us? Now, one of the ways in which we're different from other entities is that we have a sense of our own death. So that is one way in which we're distinct from tables, chairs, perhaps even animals. Other aspects that he explored in that book would be we're kind of equiprimordially constituted as being with. So what does that mean? It means that no man is an island. Part of being human is to be in a relationship to others. And there is a sense of a duty of care to those others implicit in that definition of being. He discusses a whole load of really esoteric and difficult, terse stuff. But maybe the existential analytic stuff would be the most easy to get into.
Yeah. Well, I won't drag us. I won't drag us there. I'll just footnote that the word ontology in there is literally just the I suppose, the study of being. So ontology is the act of existence. Well, that might not be quite correct, but it's concerned with existence. It's the study of how things exist. You could exist or you could not exist. And all these kind of questions are ontological questions.
Yeah. And it's a classic philosophical question because it's the type of question that nobody in their right mind would ask. I mean, who sits down in the chair and goes, in what way is the nature of the being as a human distinct from the being of other entities? I mean, it's a classic, but it is also our absolutely everyday comportment. The way that we are in the world is the way that we are in the world every day. You'd never ask the question of what is the nature of that relationship. You just do it. So it's a great example of a philosophical question because it's the type of thing that people just absolutely would not consider. But once you do consider it, really fascinating ideas emerge.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit like a blind spot in your eye where you never see this thing. And you might dedicate your life as a scientist to studying everything around you and spend your whole life doing that and never like even ask, even once, the same questions of yourself.
Yeah, it's like the fish asking, hey, what is this water?
Yeah.
You don't. Yeah. You just swim in the water.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and get us out of these deep waters. Through the medium of film, maybe. I was kind of thinking, one interesting movie that a lot of people cite was The Matrix for like a kind of archetypal movie philosophy mashup. Do you think that's kind of a pivotal moment in philosophy and movies? But there's probably been so many before that, but it's one that's cited a lot.
Well, look, I mean, it was before, The Good Place and before maybe films like Inception and building on the work of, in maybe sci-fi classics like Blade Runner. Matrix really was a hugely explicitly philosophical film. When Neo chooses between the red and the blue pill, it is really the choice of the cave. Do you want to remain in comfort but ignorance, or do you want to step into something that might be new and scary and undermine your whole understanding of the world around you? So do you want to stay in the cave looking at the shadows, or do you want to step out of the cave and see what the hell there is to see out there? And that metaphor is so simply and beautifully put in the film. Also, loads of guns and explosions. So, I mean, it was an amazing feat to get all this dense philosophical stuff into a hugely enjoyable action film. So, yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, every philosopher loves guns and explosions. That's what we...
Yeah, well, look, you're not doing philosophy right if you don't.
It's interesting. We'll leave the Matrix, but if anyone wants to, dive into the philosophy behind it, I just came across a podcast this week. I think it's called, I could get this slightly wrong, but Google will correct it. Two philosophers drinking beer and discussing a film. And they're actually, they're very, very good. And they hold PhDs as well. And they're very knowledgeable and entertaining in how they approach it. So I'll pop that in the show notes.
Link to follow in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone wants to learn more of the philosophy of the Matrix there. We should probably move on from there. Maybe the philosophy short course wants to do for education what the Matrix did for film and philosophy.
Yeah. Well, so look, that's a hell of a tall order. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do you want to talk more about that, or do you want to talk maybe about the Irish education system and philosophy in
the
Leaving Cert?
The Irish, so the Irish philosophical, so the Irish educational system, you won't hear many people saying this, but sorry, Declan, you frozen there?
Oh dear. Let's see.
Oh no, there you go. I have you
I'm
now.
back again. So, fantastic. Thank you.
I'll start again. You won't hear very many people say this, but the Irish educational system has a lot to be admired for. So in 2015, the department published the junior cycle reform document. It was based on a huge consultation ranging probably too many years, frankly, where they listened to the concerns of teachers who were sick and tired, frankly, of teaching to the terminal exam, the rote learning, the filling of the pail, not enough lighting of the fire. And how they addressed those concerns was they said, look, we're going to have a new emphasis for the junior cycle. We're going to reform the way that we do things. We're going to place greater emphasis on things like self-directed learning, metacognition, well-being, collaborative problem solving, and we're going to create space in the timetable, really is the challenge, to allow these different types of learning experiences to occur. And the report was published in 2015. Philosophers were perhaps uncharacteristically quick and organized and jumped in. And 2016 was the national curriculum for philosophy short course was published. So that was a really exciting moment for anybody who cares about philosophy.
And what was your role in that in relation to the philosophy short course? You created that. Was that in collaboration with others?
Yeah, so the philosophy short course, that work was done by an extraordinary team of people preceding me, including characters like Anya Mahan, Merrill Rice, Daniel McCrea, really like luminaries in the field of philosophy, communication, and education. Where I came in was about 2 years later when I launched the philosophy short course website. So what I realized was, well, the gap that I tried to fill, I suppose, is the curriculum is great and it's got so much great material in it, but it doesn't have a lot of resources. And I felt that if I could make the job easier for teachers by building this website, that's how I was going to contribute to the movement, as it were. So that's where the site really came from. And I've been really fortunate to collaborate with, and I had some of them speak at the first Gadfly, to get these people to speak about their experiences getting philosophy launched and up and running in Ireland. So the short course formally is, it's 100 hours taught. That equates to roughly 1 hour a week for first year, second year, and third year. That's maybe 12 to 16-year-olds for the non-Irish audience. And it allows teachers to take time out of the timetable, reduce the number of course subjects, and do something new and exciting. And philosophy is one of those new and exciting things. There are others, but you can listen to another podcast about them.
Fantastic. I won't even hazard a guess at what other courses we could be.
Well, no, I mean they're great. The things like computing and animal care and Chinese, and I mean they're good stuff, but not my passion.
Philosophy would be the one that turns them from kind of tempestuous teenagers into kind of wise and orderly philosophers. So it's a worthwhile.
I hope not. I hope not. I hope philosophy lights the fires and turns over the tables.
So I suppose, like, on that note, then, like, I suppose, why should maybe someone care about philosophy and education? Maybe from like the student perspective.
Sure.
First of all.
So first of all, it's fun. So you will have fun in the philosophy classes. It's not a DOS, but it's engaging. You'll explore new ideas that you're not allowed to anywhere else. And when I say not allowed to, I mean really not allowed to. So the types of conversations that you have in a philosophy class are, they're dangerous ideas and they have to be handled carefully, but they're exciting just for that reason. I suppose the second, maybe more pragmatic reason would be, the World Economic Forum released this list of top 20 skills for employees in 2025, and it really reads like the learning outcomes of a philosophy class. So the top 10 skills, and I have them here because I often bring this up from the World Economic Forum: analytic thinking, active learning, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, leadership, resilience, reasoning, problem solving, and ideation. I mean, the type of skills that you're going to need in the future is not the stuff that you're learning now. committing things to memory, that's a useless skill. The application of those ideas in new scenarios, identifying new problems, solving things, arguing with people, collaborating, those are the skills you're going to need in the future. That's what's going to make you valuable to an employer now and in the future. And lastly, I guess I'd say to students, you're not alone. Lots of people think that the world is really messed up. And a lot of people think that society is very unfair. A lot of people are really confused about what love is or what art is. And philosophy class is an opportunity to learn from people who have had these ideas before, stand on the shoulders of these people. And maybe, one of the really rewarding phenomena that happens in a philosophy class is students who wouldn't ordinarily talk to each other find out the most fascinating things about each other. There's a real opportunity to connect with people, find out what's going on in their heads that you just don't get in other classes. So I think, philosophy is a great idea for students.
Yeah, and I suppose you're right in that, people are confused, and in maybe perhaps now than maybe in certain other recent history kind of times in recent history. After the kind of post-war periods, I think World War II and that, the scale of the destruction and the crises that were going on, and the things that people couldn't believe they had seen and heard about, and that the world had experienced, that philosophy, like existentialism, I think really pushed on at that point and came into its own with people like Jean-Paul Sartre and de Beauvoir, and
Hannah Arendt, of course.
Arendt, the list could go on. And I do wonder, and of course there's always optimistic thinking, but I'm sure there's some truth with it, that something like that will happen, in terms of, doesn't have to be, you don't have to call it philosophy, but some big changes to how we think about things and how we approach things could come out of, the turbulent, maybe whatever you call it. You could say 5 years, decade, 2 decades. It depends on how much turbulence you want to go back to. But something may be born out of that, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID has forced people to. I hate to bring up COVID because God, aren't we all sick of it? But anyway, I think a reevaluation of values in the face of COVID. What are we really here for? What's important to us? Who is important? Who is valuable in society? Nothing like a pandemic to bring out the sharp end of the stick in answering these questions. Who deserves to get the vaccines first? How much quantity of life is valuable? Do we save people who are 90 years old? Do we prioritize children of them? So it really forces a lot of really thorny decisions. And I don't envy the teams who have to do the thinking behind the policies. But that's, richly philosophical, if, a little bleak.
Certainly, yeah. And I suppose the other elephant in the room to add to that list is things like AI coming along, and, more AI, perhaps on the march towards general artificial intelligence. We might be, maybe not. We're definitely on the march towards something, and something that we haven't encountered before. So, ethics of these systems, I see massive opportunities in that, and to be, leading that conversation and thinking in that. If someone does study a subject like philosophy, why not?
Yeah, and I've been really heartened by, I do a lot of kind of public philosophy events, Socrates Cafe. I help another friend, Lucas Curzon, who runs a great public philosophy event called the Philosopher's Hat. And we've had scientists join us who have taken courses in philosophy, and they said it has revolutionized their approach to the field of science that they work in. Regarding AI, full disclosure, my day job is AI. So that's what I work in. So all the philosophy work that I do is really evening and passion stuff. The thing that pays for all these fancy light fixtures here is AI. So what would I say about it in defense? I guess what I'd say is that it is like many things, it's a tool. So it can be used, benevolently, or it can be used in a careless way and thoughtlessly. My own field is AI in education. Really what we're seeking to do is deliver better learning outcomes for students and reduce administrative workload on teachers using machine learning and adaptive learning. I see that as a benevolent project. There are known issues around bias in AI, and there are known issues in access to AI. But yeah, it's not all bad, definitely.
Not at all. And it's interesting, just to give a concrete example following off that, is when we do talk about those biases in AI, like maybe, so an example would be that the data has a more prevalent, members of a certain population.
Yeah.
So the data is just more tuned for a certain population. And then when it encounters minorities, it's going to find that it can't deal with that as well. And we'll get very sidetracked if we go into all the problems of that. But you could bring all the different philosophical tools in on that and approaches. Yeah. You could bring in existentialism and start to say, well, let's look at it from, the person's perspective, first of all. What is it like being that minority? What is it like them? So one of the examples, I think, was water taps, water fountains in a bathroom that work on certain color skin, but not others.
Yeah.
Even putting yourself in the shoes of being that person walking in to use that, well, that's going to feed into that's basically the art of being at some level, and somewhat existentialist thinking. And that can then inform you how better to design that, to bring it to a product team. And also you can look at it in the other way from more analytical philosophy and the drier, more, let's say, structured stuff. I won't dive into that now, but there's having all those tools to approach that problem. They're just so practical.
Yeah, and
what more do people think?
It's a nice, it's a nice reminder as well that you can be enthralled to the idea that your solution design is so logical and objective and codified and binary that, of course, it exists in its own universe, quite distinct from the real world of everyday people. But the skin color is a fantastic example. Why is it that AI has such problems recognizing different skin tones? Because there is no design out of context. There's always a hermeneutic element to any work that we do, no matter how seemingly mathematical or logical or scientific it is. And being cognizant of the impact of our own hermeneutics on the work that we do in AI is something that, it's becoming more and more known as an issue in the industry, and is something a lot of people are spending a lot of time trying to figure out.
And just on the word hermeneutics there, I guess it's similar to interpreting something in its context. So often used, I suppose, with scholars of ancient texts. They try to position themselves in that moment in time, thousands of years ago or whatever it was, or it could be hundreds of years ago or 50 years ago, but to get the sense of the surrounds, because the meaning will change depending on those surrounds. And that's what you're saying with the hermeneutics there.
Yeah. And being aware of your own, your own baggage you bring to the table. There is no objective I. We are, again, back to ontology. The nature of being a human is that we bring ourselves with us wherever we go. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately as well.
It's a paradox. So we've established that students would be foolish not to study this subject. We know what's in it for the students. Anyone listening to this, that has children will be pushing them down this route. Any children listening to this will definitely be jumping at the bit to study the subject. What would be in it for teachers?
So teachers, right? Teachers was the ones who drove the reform for the junior cycle. Because as I said, they didn't sign up to fill the pail or fill the bucket or whatever that metaphor is. They signed up to light the fire. And that's what happens in philosophy classes. Go to one, try and run one. Go to my site, download a lesson plan about some area that you find interesting. It might be philosophy of science, it might be ethics, it might be philosophy of art, philosophy of sport. Try and run a class in philosophy, and you'll find yourself having the most engaging and exciting and inspiring interactions with your students that you ordinarily might, happen upon once a lucky Friday when you take the foot off the pedal to get, the facts in for the terminal exam or whatever assessment you've set them coming up. That occasional Friday when you take your foot off the pedal and you really explore the fundamental ideas in the subject that you love, those interactions are the core of philosophy classes. You can do philosophy in any other class. If you're questioning fundamental ideas, if you're having exciting conversations, if you're fostering independent learning, that's the philosophical edge to your classes. Having a dedicated class for philosophy just puts that front and center, those beautiful moments of engagement. That's what philosophy classes can create.
Yeah, I think it's probably very impactful that way, and certainly can be done right. I think it's kind of like sometimes you think back moments of your life, maybe like a holiday or a moment in a holiday or a moment in your experience. And the one that jumps out at you, you just have this clear, you can picture the moment, being in that restaurant or on that beach. And at the time, you probably didn't pay that much attention. It just seemed like that. And for some reason, this moment sticks out with you and you're trying to figure out, why does this moment stick out and resonate with me? But this other much better on paper holiday seems to be, should have been more better. And I think there is something like that to philosophy, that it is surprisingly impactful. And I don't know what a 15, our 13-year-old me or 17-year-old me would have thought of it. But I guess that experiment's hard to run. But I definitely think it's a great experiment to run for someone in that age these days, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're already asking the questions themselves. They're already, we talk about the rebelliousness of teenagers. They're questioning the nature of authority. That is something that philosophers have done time immemorial and have wrestled with and struggled with and given birth to social movements through. That's what teenagers do. They don't like being told what to do. They want to know, why do you have the authority to tell me what to do? They're falling in love. It's confusing. I mean, Jesus, I still find it confusing. I'm 41 years old now, Declan. They're grappling with these questions anyway, to bring them into the class and to create a space. Really, it's a thinking space that you're creating for them in the class. It's hugely rewarding.
Yeah, fantastic. On that note, then, teaching of children, what is different when it comes to teaching children, or maybe even, I suppose, first of all, do you deal with a range of ages? I think it was the whole secondary.
Yeah,
range.
so it's the core focus of the website is really 12 to 16, and the short course, the official one, is that age group. But there's a huge cohort of researchers and active teachers working in primary school. What are the differences? One might be, you shouldn't think that you're doing less sophisticated work because it's being presented in a simpler way. I think that's a mistake. So if you're working with young students, You might use more games and interactivity and visual stimuli. You might assign less reading. But if you're talking to a 6-year-old and you're saying to them, okay, so what animal would make the best disco dancer or accountant? If they consider your question, ask you to clarify what you mean, give you an answer, give you reasons for that answer, listen to the other kids' answers respectfully, learn from the other kids, question the other kids about their reasons. I mean, you're there. That is the work. That is the, deeply important skill. You're creating a community of inquiry. Yes, it's about bloody, does Batman beat Superman? Yes, it's about hand puppets. Yes, it's about picture books that are deceptively complex, actually. There's really rich stuff in picture books. But if you're getting that work done, philosophy is happening. And, you've done your job at any age level. So there's amazing work being done at primary level in Ireland also. One of my presenters at Gadfly 2 works exactly in this area. So I'm really looking forward to hear what she has to say. Dr. Lucy Elvis out of NUIG. So with the older kids, I suppose it is thematically, you might explore things like racial inequality. You might explore things like the foundations of authority. You might explore things like the nature of education, different tone, different emphasis, maybe more mature concepts and ideas, but the same philosophical principle. As long as the method is happening, it doesn't really matter what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this also can be used for after school clubs as well. As well, isn't it?
Yeah, and really amazing initiative from some teachers and assistants running classes in libraries, after school clubs, summer camps as well. I mean, there's even been philosophy camps done at Electric Picnic, So yeah, and hats off to them for the initiative of taking it up. But you don't need much. You need a few core ideas. You need some skills in how to lead the class in an inquiry, and you need a space where you can talk freely. It's not materials heavy.
Yeah, and would it be suitable for parents, or is that better? Like, there are a lot of books at the moment that parents can buy. Would you recommend this approach, or is this a little bit more for something like, at least, let's say, a minimum bar of an after-school club in terms of that structure, that resourcing, that planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of materials out there that parents could pick up and use. Why am I being so hesitant here? Yes, you can have philosophically rich conversations with your kids. Do not underestimate the extraordinary skill set and professionalism of teachers when you try and do that. Anybody who's been trying to homeschool during this pandemic will have very quickly realized teaching is bloody hard. It's very hard. You come into it with all of your own sets of ideas about how it's going to go, and you're impatient with them, and they don't give you the right answers, and then you realize that's not what you're there for anyway. I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience here. It can be done, and there's some beautiful books and some great resources. I can send you some links on afterwards. But yeah, it's no walk in the park. You do need to put in the practice to get it right,
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of resources now as well, especially younger kind of fiction books that target, that they're aimed more, 9 years of age, some that are younger and things like that, all the way up. So it's becoming a more mainstream children's book.
Actually, you've just reminded me, there's a fantastic book, which is a good place to start because it's narrative in structure. It's a storybook. It's not flashcards, which are available and are great, but it's very accessible. It is called the Philosophy of Resistance Squad. It's written by an Irish guy called Dr. Robert Grant, to give him his full due. And he's actually going to be talking at the Gadfly event on the 17th. He spoke at the first one very briefly, and the book is lovely. It's a great introduction to philosophical ideas, and the storyline is fantastic. It's about a kid who gets a scholarship to go to a private school, a very fancy school. He's a bit of a fish out of water, and he quickly realizes that not everything is as it seems at his school, and he comes across some characters who help him make sense of what's really going on. It's a lovely story. So recommend that.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
Do you have kids yourself, Declan?
Yes, I do indeed, and I've experimented with the philosophy education.
How's it gone, honestly?
I suppose I've studied a bit of philosophy, and I'm into it. Obviously, or I probably wouldn't be here. My being would be somewhere else to bring Haidinger back into it. So it's not my first philosophical rodeo, but I find it brilliant. I suppose mainly because kids are so open-minded. You don't expect them to say the things that they say, and it's bizarre. Like it's really bizarre, the things that they might say. Some of them I'm almost hesitant to repeat for fear of who might arrive on my doorstep. But like here's one weird one that my daughter said was just, well, what is always available? Now she's very young. She's like, in the 4 age range. She said, what is always available? I was like, And she was like, love. And I was just like, the abstract language going on in there. And obviously
really
and then there was a big hug. Fantastic. And I was in tears. I was like,
that's sweet.
That was only a few minutes before we did this. So I was boring. No, that bit's slightly embellished. But no. And but they do kind of just, they're very open, as you said, cognizantly. They're not, and I think that's to your point of, you're not doing less sophisticated stuff. I think sophisticated often means abstraction. Where can someone take something from the specifics of the real world, generalize it up, and either repackage that out as a new kind of phrase like that's quite interesting, or to apply it in a different way, or just to hold it in the abstract, even in their head, and you can't see into that. They can do that. Like kids can do that.
Yeah.
That I think is where things get interesting, and where philosophy can be particularly powerful. And maybe maths can do an element of that, a strong element of that, but it's within mathematical language. And I think philosophy can bring that to a syntactic language. There is this whole thing of philosophy of language, and kids have language going around in their head, and they've got ways of thinking, and it stretches those, I think. And it's like anything, the younger you can do this kind of thing, the better, right? I mean, it just to, for interest and development and fun and all these things. So I find it, you might know what I mean by this phrase, but it's difficult to get out of your own way when you're dealing with kids, to have that ability to kind of stand back and let the things unfold, and let them get confused, and let them contradict each other, and to not step in as the parent and correct the course and reframe things and make sure that they get the right conclusion, because that's really your role as a parent. When you try and split yourself, I can do it with strangers, and I teach sometimes at Gonzaga, and I love it. But with your own kids, I'm just thinking about it now. Yeah, you have that tension, where as a parent, you're supposed to guide them to the right answer. And that's really not what you're supposed to be doing in philosophy, I suppose. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, definitely at times. I think a big part is framing. I think like the act of parenting often not to get too sidetracked in this, but the act of parenting, one massive tool is framing. So just giving them context to see what happened. So let's say they were playing in a soccer match and, things didn't go well. And they're like, oh, well, they come off and they might feel good, if you frame it in that, like, well, your own, you did well, you showed, all the good attributes that that we could list out. And even if they didn't, you still tried well, tried hard. And the big thing is, and I think this is a great thing from the Stoics, who kind of a group of philosophers that ran around a similar time to Socrates, or maybe just after predominantly. But they always said, well, I think you could sum up their motto as almost, it could always get worse, right?
Yeah.
And you, like, sometimes I might say something that might sound crazy. I might say, well, look, it's better than getting injured, right? I mean, because then you won't be able to play soccer for maybe weeks, months, and then I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, well, that will happen someday. I mean, it's not just an abstract thing. Yeah. Everyone that does this gets injured at some point. Now, it doesn't have to be,
career ending,
even for a philosopher. But then they will one day get that injury, and the framing, even though it's quite long term, they will remember that you said that. And it's amazing when you land in a bad situation, having been prepared for it, compared to landing in a bad situation. I think there's a world of difference, and framing is everything. I just think it's half the art of parenting. Act might be more appropriate.
Yes, you are assuming a role, so yeah. That's really beautifully put, Declan. Yeah, no, I like that. I really like that. I tend to talk about, look, know the things that you can control and the things that you can't control if you win the game. You can control, did you show up? Did you put in your best? Did you support your teammates? Or did you bitch and moan about some bad pass? Did you shout at the referee? How did you conduct yourself? Did you have good, did you behave virtuously, I suppose, if you want to use the terminology? Those things you can control. But the outcome, look, there's only so much you can do. Now, I've never had to say that to my kid because he always wins it full. He's amazing, but
I hope we never end up. I hope our kids never end up playing each other. This could be, I don't know.
What team does he play for?
What? Broadford Rovers.
Okay.
And Ballantyre St. John's. So we've got the GA and the soccer going.
Holy moly! I tell you what.
I'm relatively
playing for those teams, you better get used to failure. I don't even know them. I'm kidding.
And there's no edit button on this, so I can't even cut that out. But definitely, well, one thing I found sport way more incredible. As a thing to do. I can see the benefits of sport, and never having been that sporty myself. And if I pan the camera down, but my belly will afford to the lack of sportiness. So this is I don't know where the genetics on this one came from, but maybe not my side.
If you find yourself increasingly interested in sport, it's one of the strands on the short course. So philosophy of sport is one of the 10 areas that students cover or can cover in the short course. So a lot of it is elective. So philosophy of sport is surprisingly rich and surprisingly interesting. I was dreading having to create that page and actually ended up really enjoying it. So jump in if you have a moment.
Oh, fantastic. I think I may need to do that. And do you have kind of a series? We've talked about a few of them. Is there like a top 3 favorite philosophers that you like to go to for this? Are some easier to bring into these younger audiences and situations than others?
So what resonates with the audience that you're with? As I said, philosophy is a little bit mischievous. So if I'm teaching in a particularly religious school, I like to do Nietzsche. I like to introduce new ideas about their reevaluation of ethics, his criticism of Christianity as he understood it. So I'm a bit mischievous in that way. Plus, his aphorisms are so profoundly insightful and short that they can really be presented quickly, and they're like lightning rods for action. So I find Nietzsche to be a great thinker for the age group that I work with. Simone de Beauvoir, we've already spoken about her in terms of the extent to which gender identity is a performative act and what it is to be a woman and how that's distinct from what it is to be a man. I would love to bring in Heidegger, but it's just, there's so many hills to climb before you can get into them that I wouldn't do it to them. And then, characters like Sartre, Descartes is amazing. It's extremely readable, extremely accessible. Hume is like you're literally in the pub talking to David Hume. It's just the way that he writes. It's so readable and it's so engaging. So they would be, I guess, some of it's hard to have favorites, but they are my favorites.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah.
What about you? Who would you find inspiring, or who resonated with you during your studies?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the different path routes. Hume, I without diving into his points too much, the way he sort of turned what you'd observe around in the universe or in the world, the sun coming up in the morning and going down, you would take that to be the surest thing you could bet on in the field of what's called in philosophy, I suppose, the field of knowledge and certainty, which is called epistemology. And then he said, but what grounds have you to suspect that sun, will come up tomorrow? And your only grounds is you've seen it before. And there are things we're more certain of, like a triangle. We're more certain of a triangle, ironically, because by definition, it has 3 points. We can be certain that a triangle will have to be a triangle. But we're more certain about what is a triangle than the sun comes up the following morning. And just when he phrases that, he didn't maybe say it exactly like that, but sentiment similar to it. And all of a sudden you go, whoa, well, what about that sun? And okay, we think that's going to come up, but it does then, as you start to slide away from that, things that are a little bit less certain, it gives you great grounds for skepticism. And just that kind of thinking is quite interesting. And
and the point isn't that the sun isn't going to come up tomorrow, right? He wasn't insane. The point is, how sure are you about the thing that you think you're surest about? Let's take the thing that you are totally sure about. Let's tease it a little bit. Let's interrogate it. Let's ask a few questions about it. Are you still so sure about it? What other things in your life did you previously think you were really sure about? Are you sure about them now? And it's a beautiful entry point. Yeah.
Yeah. That stuff's great. So I would have probably gone for a lot of the same people you cited there. Absolutely. The one other person I think that always just resonates with me, and again, it's one on the parenting side. It kind of comes in is Jean-Paul Sartre, and again, post-war period. He's seen the horrors of World War II. He even fought in World War II, though I think he got a stint as a weather balloon person or a weather observationist.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He wrote many things while he was doing that as well. So he had a lot of time to think, let's put it this way. And I think what always sticks out to me is you can almost distill his stuff down. One interpretation is you always have a choice.
Yeah.
And we may feel that, we may feel hopeless about, it could be anything from climate change to certain things in COVID or vaccine hesitancy or people's attitudes, politics, you name it. Or we might feel we're backed into a situation where we really are in trouble. it's one day before an exam, and we didn't study. We spent all
Yeah,
semester partying or something
guilty.
like that. But or you might find that again on a sports pitch that you just can't do this. But
Hmm.
but then that brand of existentialism, when you look into it and study it, he forces upon you the fact that you always have a choice.
Yeah.
You may feel hopeless, but you still have a choice, and that is what you have as an agent. And I think that's just a very powerful idea. And people can
But
say,
it's what it is it's terrifying. It's a
yeah,
terrifying idea because
yeah,
it really holds you to account for continuing to choose the thing that you've said you don't want to. I think of the dead end job, the loveless marriage, the facing up to the fact that fear is the thing that's, fear of knowing how free you are, keeps you stuck in the patterns. And in a way, what I was speaking about earlier, getting over my own stupid fear to run the conference and realizing that you're kind of a prisoner of lots of things that maybe you hadn't considered. And actually you do have a lot of freedom, and it is ultimately you to whom you are accountable. You can choose your essence, who you want to be in life. You really do have a lot of choice. And it's dishonest to deny yourself that choice. So suck it up and get on with it and realize and accept you've chosen it, or change it up.
yeah. That's a good way to put it. And I have to say, at the same time, if I leaned on any of the schools of philosophy in that respect, I put myself down as a determinist. So then you can ask, how do I reconcile those two things? And we'd end up talking about paradoxes for many hours.
Oh no, okay. Well,
So
determinism is so easy to understand. Free will in the face of determinism is really, it's very awkward. Yeah,
it is. I think we'll save that one for the future.
That sounds good to me. Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't spend all the semester partying. I did do a little bit of pre-planning. We both did, chatting prior to this. So I do have a couple of sections which I think I will put in reserve for the future. One I mightn't though, is on Critchley. If I got the name right, did you want to drop Critchley in?
Yeah, I mean,
I would profess ignorance.
Yeah, no. So why do I want to talk about Critchley? So Simon Critchley is a philosopher, and I suppose he is his phraseology is really inspirational to me. So people often say, why did you get into philosophy, or why would you bother? And he has this beautiful, very short passage, and it's not like his most well-known piece by any means, but it really resonated with me. He said that, look, when you go to university, people will say science begins in wonder, or philosophy begins in wonder at the world around you. And it's all very lofty and nice. And what I love about Critchley is he says that, look, philosophy is born of one of two types of disappointment. So there is disappointment with the world around you, the inequity that you see, the problems that you see, and that broadly is political disappointment. And then there is disappointment with whatever metaphysical story you've been told about the nature of the universe, or who your God is, or what the creator is. And that is religious disappointment. And he said, those are the real avenues into philosophy. When you look around the world that you see and wonder how have some things gone seemingly so wrong and persist for so long, that is the disappointment that drives political philosophy. And then the disappointment with the stories, you're told about how the universe works and your role and your place in it and your relationship to the creator. Disappointment with that is really the beginning of philosophy of religion and moral philosophy and so many epistemology and so many other branches. And And I always thought that formulation, it just really resonated with me. Disappointment is the parent of philosophy. It's not wonder. It's not really love of wisdom. Is it really love of wisdom? Not so sure it is. I think Christian's right. I think it's actually a disappointment. So on that cheery note.
Oh, I think I start needing to remind myself of phrases like "what is always available, love," and try to cheer myself up now.
Well, what is always daddy is always available, especially when you're working.
Yeah, there's a blockade in this office makeshift studio door that no one is breaking down unless it's the FBI or something. An arrest warrant will need to be sent. That is very interesting about Creechley. I have zero exposure to Creechley. It sounds like he would be good friends with Schopenhauer, in the sense of Schopenhauer also, I suppose, so the dark forces in the world, to want a better word. I don't know if there's any tie between them or.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know of his debt to Schopenhauer. I do know that he's kind of an annoyingly cool dude. I think he plays in a band, or he also writes children's books, or he also, does extreme sports or something. There's something about him where I was like, oh God, you're really gifted in philosophy and you do this other stuff as well. So I can't quite recall it now, but yeah, that was what I was left with.
I'm looking forward to the album, Disappointment.
Yeah. He's like, he also sometimes plays bass with The Who when they have reunion tours. It's something really appalling.
Oh, fantastic. I'm disgusted. What I might do is I'm conscious I want to talk about the event for sure, and we're coming up. We've just hit around the hour mark. I know we've brought it in before. I'd like to tie it together, and we'll see then if we've time at the end. We may return to some some of the other few questions we had. But I'd love to talk about the event.
Sure.
It's next week. It's Godfly 2. What we've already talked about it. Do you want to say about the lineup? Anything that you haven't talked about? You mentioned.
Oh my God! So the lineup, Declan. As rich as the ocean is deep, the lineup that I have for it is like I really have to pinch myself when I think about the people that I've been able to contact and bring for both events. Really, I'll focus on the second. We're starting off with Stephen Law. So Stephen Law is the author of no less than 3 books on the national curriculum. He is the editor of Philosophy Journal Think. He is the author of the book Believing Bullshit. And he is just an extraordinary clear writer, does amazing materials. He's going to be talking about religion, philosophy of religion, and philosophy, how those things relate. We're going to hear from, so he's our keynote. Really happy to get him, I have to say. Also delighted to have Dr. Lucy Elvis from NUIG. She's going to be talking about philosophy of art. She's just done a philosophy in the community project in schools all around art, which is a collaboration with artists. Really interested to hear about that project. I have a good friend of mine, Lucas Curzon. Lucas runs the Philosopher's Hat. Philosophy is typically a very dusty, dry, boring, seat-bound activity. Not so for him. He's going to be talking, his session is called Thinking with Hands. So it's all about how you can use the body while doing philosophy. Something I never did in my entire career in philosophy. It was always sitting down, sometimes lying down. So I'm really interested to hear about physicality plays into his ideas. Then I have Rob Brandt did an amazing documentary on philosophy in schools, Future Visions for RTE, which is available on my site. Thank you again, Rob, for that. And also broadcast on RTE too. He's the author of the Philosophy Resistance Squad. He is going to be talking about listening as a philosophical act. So the role of listening in genuine philosophical dialogue is going to be what he focuses on. We are going to have Karen McMahon from Educate Together. She's the secretary of their Ethical Education Network. She's a regular contributor to some of the public philosophy events that I do. She's fab. She's going to be doing kind of lines from the trenches. So letter from the front line. So she's in there getting schools up and running across different schools and programs, failing miserably, having wonderful triumphs, and learning all along the way. So she's going to be sharing all that with us. And then to finish it all off, God damn it, Peter Worley, aka the If Man, co-CEO of Philosophy Foundation UK. He is just an author of 2 books on the curriculum as well, I should add, and shortlisted for a prize for his most recent one. Extraordinary career in philosophy for children. He is a master facilitator. He runs training sessions in philosophy facilitation out of the UK. You can take them remotely. He is going to be leading. So this is, again, one of those guys who's like really good at philosophy, but also plays in a band. He also writes music. But what he's going to be doing for us is he's going to be leading an inquiry with 20 people at the conference, and we're going to get everybody to go dark, and he will lead an inquiry, and then during the inquiry he's going to live comment on the techniques that he's using. Then afterwards, in real time, he's going to deliver his own analysis and assessment of his facilitation. So he's going to tell us how to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to tell us what he's doing while he's doing it. Then he's going to tell us what he just did. So an amazing way to finish out the day. So I'm so excited.
That sounds like kind of a theatrical performance. It's almost like you're getting a theater experience.
I mean, it's really something. I've trained with them before, and also Morel Rice in Ireland, who runs CPD here, and the two of them, it is a performance. It's really just a pleasure to behold. And all of this, Declan, for €10.
Yeah.
Am I crazy? I guess I am.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It is very wallet friendly.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic thing, though. Just, that it is affordable for people to attend this. It's brilliant. Like, that is a rich, as you say,
yeah, well,
vein of talent to tap into. For one day of your life.
yeah, and they're all creating unique new material exclusively for this event. So, which I'm really bowled over by, because frankly, they'd be well within the rights to warm up some half-baked deck from a few years ago, for the notice that I gave them, and it's a small event, but they've all created material fresh for the conference. So I'm just honored. I'm delighted to be able to have them.
Fantastic. Really, really is. Yeah. It's a great lineup. I saw it unfold on Twitter as you announced.
Very good. No, you're very good. Thanks for getting in touch, man. I really appreciate it. So, I'm psyched. I'm really, a little bit nervous as well, but I'm, really excited.
It looks like good nerves from where I'm sitting. So
yeah. Well, look, I'm full of juice, so I'm ready to bring them on and get out of the way.
Yeah, it's the scrappy do nerves. Let me at him, let him out.
Exactly.
It's good stuff. You do have a competition, I think I saw as I trolled on Twitter. If you want to let everyone
do.
In
so actually, I have. So Jennifer Horgan is AKA the Irish Examiner's secret teacher. So she's been tweeting as the secret teacher Ireland for the last kind of 2+ years. And she's amazing. She's such a passionate teacher, a great writer. She's written a book basically called Oh Captain, My Captain, a reference to both the poem and the Robin Williams film, who is 7 years dead today, I read on Twitter. But her book is all about kind of a new vision for educational reform in Ireland. The question to win a signed copy is, what one change would you make to the educational system that you're in? So if that's Ireland, the Irish one, and if it's abroad, what's the one thing that you would change? And she'll be picking the winner and announcing it. And I'll give you a little bit of a scoop. We might be hearing more from Jennifer at the next Gadfly event. She's compiling a course in philosophy and film right now, so that's a passion for her as well. So I knew there was something about her I liked.
That's brilliant. Yeah, wow. Yeah, the film philosophy overlap is strong there between you.
Yeah. Well, it's a visual medium. It's it's emotionally evocative. It's visually engaging, and done right, it can be genuinely moving and profound. I mean, film is, the medium of our times in some respects, and it's hugely powerful. So, I would have read, a lot of Cavell on cinema. And anyway, look, the course I'm sure she's doing is amazing, and I can't wait to see her on the event.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. What I will do, I'll link to the tweet, the competition tweet in the show notes. We'll do that. So, that will be a bit more tangible. If someone's listening in, just check down through that, and you will be able to see exactly what we just said there if you want to
Thank
join
God
in.
Somebody is thinking practically, Declan. Thank you.
I learned this in philosophy, to be practical. I was clueless until then.
Theory and praxis. There you go.
The event, though, definitely it's just incredible in terms of the lineup, and I'm sure it'll be absolutely amazing. So I can't recommend people enough. Certainly to go there. That it will definitely be in the show notes.
Well, thank you so much.
So,
look.
So we'll have that one. What I'll do is I did mention a section maybe might be interesting to talk about. We'll close out this kind of conversation. Let's say we'll hit the closing section now. We'll check our clocks. We'll see if we want to do a follow up at the end of this. But we'll move into the sunset era of things here.
Okay.
The sun is definitely set looking out my window here. And what's next in your list of philosophical or non-philosophical goals for education? I suppose really it should be philosophical goals.
Yes. So, God, next on my list, I mean, I've got the side and I'm running a conference every 3 months. Look, and again, this is kind of a bit of an insight for you that I haven't shared. The real vision for Gadfly is a live event. Online is amazing, and I have really pushed the presenters to bring interactivity and engagement, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to really get involved and be part of the event online. But really, the vision is a live event. I want to run something like a festival of ideas. I wanted to have a social aspect in the evening. I want beers and wine and art exhibits and music and debates and interviews, and really with a key focus on philosophy. That's my and all of the work that I'm doing, teaching, bringing materials to teachers of philosophy, and that focus on education, that's really where I want to bring the event. I can't do it for now. I'm so grateful that people are showing up online and the presenters as well. But my real vision is a live event with all of the same spirit and same energy, but a little something extra.
Oh, brilliant! It sounds amazing. It sounds a bit like the what was it, the square that Socrates operated in, the quorum. It's left.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I draw inspiration from we have the Dalkey Book Festival down the road from me. Great event. I saw Stephen Fry there speaking in a gorgeous old church and on the outskirts of Dalkey. He was a fantastic. There's a festival called the Hey Literary Festival. How the Light Gets In. There's some amazing festivals out there, and there's a real appetite. People like being challenged. They like talking about dangerous ideas or challenging ideas, or engaging in intellectual debate and ideas, and seeing people who are great at it do it. So yeah, fingers crossed. Got to work out the budget as well, Declan. I mean, I'm not going to be retiring on Gadfly tickets at 10 a pop, so I'll have to come up with a proper plan. But that's the vision.
I think Socrates did have this element of never having much material wealth. It was a pillar of his. I wouldn't recommend taking that literally in our current systems of ontology.
Sadly, I won't be able to pay for venues with my good looks, but so I'll have to figure something out. But give me time.
Fantastic, yeah. I suppose we've talked about the philosophy short course, Gadfly, which in my head maybe is a positive thing. It comes out as Gladfly, but Gadfly it is. And is there anything else that you, in terms of your work, that you want to talk about? I know it's a completely fine answer, but just to ask the question if there is anything else.
No, I mean, those are the things that, as I say, I have a day job in education and educational technology. I have young family, doing the website, creating the materials. I'd like to do a bit more materials creation. Right now, I'm the beneficiary of some amazingly generous contributors and third parties. People like Susan Andrews and Morel Rice who've given me materials for the site that they've allowed me to share. I'd like to start creating more of my own, but it's tough work and it takes a long time. So no, those are the key projects right now. Live event, keep the site going.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I certainly wasn't implying it wasn't enough.
You're making me feel bad now, Declan. I feel like I should be doing more for the community.
No, it is absolutely phenomenal. Just looking at the list of things that you've achieved and that you're still pushing on, it really is absolutely amazing. Is there any way it's best for people to follow your work and follow you? Would it be a Twitter handle?
Yeah, I'm on the Twitter, so I'm on. It's @Daniel McCrea _ so it's some other Daniel McCrea, still the easy tag. So it's @DanielMCCREA _ and mostly talking about the stuff that I talk about today. Share resources, put out some crazy ideas, look for collaborators, and just really anything to do with philosophy and education. That's what I talk about. So if that's your area, jump in, especially if you're in Ireland.
Amazing. Yeah, brilliant.
I'm not on the Instagram or the TikTok yet. I feel a little bit old for all that, Declan, but I should probably again get over myself.
I think you may have less time if you start doing those things. You may have less time for everything else. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Choose wisely. Well, if this is the end of Where We Talk, and we're not certain of that yet, thanks very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And just even, maybe getting to know you a little bit over the last couple of weeks, our chats and that, it's, they've not been, you've got very long emails, apologies
yes.
about that.
Oh my God. Nobody could accuse you being underprepared. You're really on it, so fair play.
Thanks very much. You're very generous with your time and all that. So if this is to be the end for now, thank you very much, Dan.
You're very welcome, Declan. Cheers.